Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. This completes the going to the three yashas. Panakipada Ramani Sakataram Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from harming or destroying living things. Adinadana Varamani Sakataram Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kamesu Nichachara Brahmani Siddhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musa Vada Brahmani Siddhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from wrong speech. Sura, Mareya, Maja, Padatana, Brahmani Sakataram Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from intoxicants that cause terrorism. I undertake the precept to refrain from sources of livelihood that bring harm to other beings. I undertake the precept to refrain from acting out of ill will or taking satisfaction in the misfortunes of others. I undertake the precept to be open-hearted and generous in all my relationships with others. I undertake the precept to act with loving kindness and compassion in all my relationships with others. I undertake the precept to live with mindfulness and follow the Eightfold Path through daily study, meditation, and reflection. With these 10 precepts, virtue becomes the vehicle for a happy existence. Through virtue, good fortune is attained. Virtue is the vehicle for liberation. Let us purify our virtue. This completes the 10 precepts. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be free from ill will. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings make themselves truly happy. Thank you and good evening. I hope you're all doing well. And was this timer working okay this afternoon? I noticed that it was turned off when I came in just now. Okay, good. Glad to hear that. Okay. So, well, last night we were talking about the truth of dukkha and the cause of dukkha and the cessation of dukkha. And so I'm just wondering if any of you have had any thoughts on that since then, or any comments you'd like to make. Yes.
I think dukkha comes from our craving for other things. That's the main reason.
Yes, that's exactly right. Dukkha comes from craving for other things, or craving not to have the things that we don't want. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question instead of a comment. Dukkha comes from craving, aversion, and ignorance. And the part about ignorance, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about it, because I sort of have an idea, but I feel like I'm not paying enough attention.
Okay. Well, it's not quite the way you said there that craving comes from desire and aversion and ignorance, but rather desire and aversion are craving. And craving occurs because there is ignorance, which is a very important point. You know, we talk about the cessation of craving, which is the means to the cessation of dukkha. And so there's a question, how do we bring about the cessation of craving? And but the three that you mentioned, desire, aversion, and ignorance, these are the three unwholesome roots. And desire and aversion are themselves manifestations of craving. Do you see that?
Craving is it seems like it's desire. I'm a little bit fuzzy about craving and desire.
Well, you see, craving encompasses both the positive side and the negative side. When you have something that you don't want, you have aversion towards it. You have a pain and you have aversion towards the pain. That's a form of craving. It's a form of desire. It's the desire to have the pain go away, or to have the cause of unpleasantness go away, or to have the experience of unpleasantness go away. So aversion is a form of craving. So it's just the way we use these words. Like if we use the word lust or greed, that's always in the sense of wanting to have, wanting to grasp onto the positive, give me side of it. But aversion is the opposite side of it, the negative, the take it away, push it away, I don't want it, keep it away. But they're both craving. You see? The craving in this regard, the English word craving, it means both, and that's what the Pali word tana means. Tana means that desire to have or to not have. What is craving? Craving is as the craving for existence, and it's a craving for non-existence. Both. It's the craving for sensual pleasures, undoubtedly, and it's the craving for pleasure, undoubtedly. You know, definitely it is. And it's also the craving for existence. But it's also the craving for the non-existence of what is not wanted and not enjoyed and is unpleasant. And also, it's in the extreme form, it's the craving for non-existence that comes when a person becomes so miserable in their life circumstances that they don't want to live anymore.
And that would be an example of aversion?
That would be an example of aversion to life. Yeah. But it's still craving. The craving for non-existence is still craving. So the person who is so miserable and despairing and depressed that they want to take their own life, it's the craving for the ending of existence. And these are all craving, using the word craving to describe those things that are problems for us. Of course, in terms of that aspect of craving, which is the desire for something, and keep in mind that the desire for liberation, the desire for the Dharma, that is a positive thing. That motivates us to practice. So sometimes that comes up that, well, if desire is a problem, then what about the desire to become enlightened?
Sometimes it done without wisdom, it could be kind of hindering. Like I have a lot of desire for fast progress, and that's actually slowing me down.
Exactly. Yeah, that is true, and it can do that. And in fact, even the desire for liberation has to be let go of in order to finally attain liberation. But in the meantime, the desire for liberation motivates you to practice and to get to that point where you need to give it up. But yes, sometimes you get your desire to succeed more quickly can just get in your way. And it's good to keep that in mind. Desire as a process that's taking place in your mind in the moment is it is the essence of dissatisfaction. And it's dissatisfaction with the dissatisfactoriness of life that makes us want to become liberated. But at the same time, it contributes to the fact that you are in a state of dissatisfaction. And it can lead to, any time that state is present, it can lead to other unwholesome states like impatience, doubt, things like that. Doubt's one of those things that we need to talk about the 5 hindrances. We'll probably talk about those tomorrow on doubt. It's the 5 hindrances. But one of the problems with desire leads to impatience, leads to doubt, which can lead to falling away from the practice, which is a different kind of problem. Yeah.
What's the difference between is love a kind of desire? What's the difference between love and loving kindness and compassion?
Very good question. Love takes several forms. A greedy person loves their money and their possessions, right? Mm-hmm. And that's obviously not a good thing. But when we say love there, we mean they have a strong attachment to. When we say loving kindness, or love in another sense, means wanting what's best for someone else. And that's quite different completely. Even if you take the kind of love, romantic love, that people experience in relationships, that is filled with selfish desire. You want to be with this person because they'll make you happy, because you are expecting to get pleasure of various kinds and satisfaction of various kinds. And in that case, clearly, although we use the same word, love, there's a huge selfish component. I think that's completely obvious to everyone, right?
Mm-hmm. But can you have a selfish component but also wish the best for the other person?
Yes, you can. And fortunately, this often happens. You see, when people come together out of their selfish desires and form a couple, generally it can go one of, there's two general ways it can go, with of course lots of variations in between. But in general, what you'll see is after a certain period of time, they become dissatisfied with, they're no longer satisfied with what they're getting from the other person, and then they split up to go find somebody else that's going to give them more of what they want. Or else, they go to a different place and they develop the other kind of love, which is the sincere caring for the happiness and well-being of the other person. And then it no longer is just about getting what each of them wants and needs from the others. Of course, sometimes one can go one way and one can go the other too, and there's kind of imbalances. But fortunately, as human beings, we are predisposed to both kinds of love. And as we come to know somebody very closely and very intimately, and to understand them, and to really what happens, we begin to see ourselves in them and them and ourselves, so that we understand how they feel, and we feel compassion for them and their suffering, and then we care about them and their well-being in a more and more unselfish way. And so even though we may start out with an entirely selfish kind of love, it can develop into an unselfish kind of love. It goes the other way too. Parents with their children start off, it's very unselfish. Their love just spontaneously comes. They want the best for their children. But as the children grow up and grow older, then the parents start having their own needs, things that they want. And the love of a parent for a child starts to become more and more selfish as time goes by. Most of these love relationships between people, unless they are very, very wise and spiritually developed people, are going to be a mixture of selfish love and unselfish love, or loving kindness. And so the quality of the relationships will reflect that. And we see that in relationships they provide a certain degree of happiness and satisfaction, but they also provide a certain degree of conflict and unhappiness as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that the ignorance is a cause of the craving.
Yes.
And because the craving never can be satisfied completely.
Yes.
So as a result, it's a hatred. Is that correct?
As a result, there is
hatred.
Sometimes there is hatred. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But the ignorance, that's a very important thing, the ignorance. What do we mean by ignorance as an unwholesome root? And ignorance is something that's always present when craving is present. So there are many aspects to ignorance. One aspect of ignorance is not realizing the truth of dukkha, not realizing that you cannot ever make yourself happy through having external things. And as long as you're ignorant of that fact, then you will keep being filled with desire, because this is what happens to us. Anytime we experience pleasure, we attribute the cause of that pleasure to some object or some circumstance, something that takes place. And then what we want is more pleasure, but what we form in our mind is the desire for the thing that we see as the cause of the pleasure. And because that's impermanent, and for all the other reasons that we talked about last night, that's always going to lead to dissatisfaction in the end. So that's one aspect of ignorance as a basis for craving. That's like saying, I agree. But it goes much deeper than that, and that's really what insight is about. When we talk about gaining insight, that is overcoming the fundamental ignorance that we have about the way things are, that is at the root of this. When we overcome the ignorance as to the cause of suffering, and the futility of attempting to obtain satisfaction in things of the world, then it's at that point that we have the opportunity to begin doing the actual work of overcoming craving. And that's really that's what all of our practice is leading towards. Eventually, that's the heart of what it's about. One absolutely crucial aspect of ignorance is the attachment that we have to our sense of self, of personhood, because we think and we act, our behavior and the arising of craving is all rooted in this belief in ourself as a real and persistent entity. Do you see that? And this is a kind of ignorance that's not easily uprooted, because no matter how much you can nod your head and say, yeah, I see that, I still feel like a self, right? That's what you're going to come back to. And when something hurts me, immediately comes the craving to eliminate the cause of that pain. And when something causes this self-pleasure, then immediately comes the desire to obtain more of the thing that caused that pleasure. And so this is the part that's very difficult for us to overcome, this illusion. And that's what we're working on, and I'm going to start getting down to the nitty-gritty of that. Really, we talk about the four truths. The truth of dukkha, the cause of dukkha, and the cessation of dukkha. And the fourth noble truth is the path to the cessation of dukkha, also called the Eightfold Noble Path. And we're following that path right now in this retreat. The Eightfold Noble Path is divided up into three parts. The first part is virtue. The second part is concentration or meditation. And the third part is wisdom. And these all work together, but they build on one another. The first part of the Eightfold Path is virtue, and it consists of right speech, right action, and right livelihood, these three things. This is the foundation. Without this foundation, there's a limit to how far you can progress on a spiritual path. If you don't work on virtue, and if you don't perfect your virtue, then you will not be able to succeed in the next two parts of the Eightfold Path. The second part is called concentration or meditation, and it too has three parts to it, which is right concentration, right mindful awareness, and right effort. And the practice the practices that we're doing here are for the development of right concentration and right mindful awareness. And of course, we're making use of right effort in some sense in order to accomplish that. But let me just speak of right concentration. What is right concentration? Right concentration is concentration that is developed to a very refined stage called samatha. This is where the mind becomes trained so that anything that wherever and however you place the attention, it remains there. So if you wish to investigate an object and you direct your attention to it, it doesn't wander off. It remains on that object. There is single-pointedness and unification of mind as a part of concentration. And I talked about this the first night. Single-pointedness is that not only does your mind remain where you placed it, but it does so unwaveringly. It's not just sort of wobbling about here and there and getting stronger and weaker and expanding and contracting the scope of your awareness. But if you, and you have control of it, if you are examining the entirety of your body, if you're examining the entirety of the objects of the room, you're single-pointedly focused on that. It's not changing, shifting, expanding, contracting, moving around. Or if you are single-pointedly focused on something like the feelings of pleasant and unpleasant that arise in conjunction with individual thoughts in your mind. That's very, very focused. You're excluding everything else, but your mind is trained so it allows you to do that. These are the qualities of the mind in samatha. In the unification of the mind, your mind is all these different processes going in different directions. When they all come together, so that all the parts of your mind are working in harmony and cooperation towards the same objective, that's unification of mind. Now what happens with unification of mind is that there arises meditative joy and bliss. As a part of meditative joy and bliss, you experience great bodily pleasure, but you experience happiness of mind as well. And this is part of samatha. And that, as a result of that bliss and pleasure and focused attention, there develops a profound tranquility. And as a result of that tranquility, you experience equanimity, so that although the things that you experience are pleasurable and painful, you're not driven by desire and aversion. You have the equanimity to accept them as they are without grasping after them or pushing them away. This is a state of samatha. This is concentration that is absolutely necessary for the third part of the Eightfold Path, which is wisdom. But you cannot achieve samatha unless you have mastered the virtue aspect. If you have been living in an unvirtuous way, your mind will be agitated by worry, by remorse. Your mind will be disturbed by ill will towards those that you've been in conflict with. And so you can sit and meditate, and you'll come to a point where you have wonderful concentration in terms of single-pointedness, but the mind will not relax into that, and it will not become effortless, and the joy and the pleasure and the happiness will not arise, because your mind is agitated by worry and remorse and ill will. So that's the sense in which concentration is limited by the development of virtue. Right mindful awareness, that high level of mindful awareness, depends upon develop in that concentration. So all of these things work together. And right effort, I'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's just move on. The third part of the Eightfold Path, the last two, the first three you'll recall were right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And then the second three were right concentration, right mindful awareness, and right effort. The last two elements of the Eightfold Path, which are the division called wisdom, constitute right view and right understanding, or sometimes it's said right intention and right view. But this is where the wisdom comes in. This is where being able to understand things as they really are. And wisdom, of course, is the opposite of ignorance. The more wisdom you have, the less ignorance. The less ignorance you have, then the less you are subject to craving. And the less you are subject to craving, the more you are free of dukkha. So that's the way in which the Eightfold Path is a path that leads to the cessation of craving, which in turn removes the cause of suffering and leads to the cessation of suffering.
There seems to be many people who are doing wrong speech, action, and livelihood, but they don't even know that they're doing it. Does that mean they have maybe less remorse, less worry?
I doubt it. I think that probably the more likely case is that somebody who is engaging in a lot of wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood without even realizing it is engaging in even more that they are aware of. So that they probably have plenty of cause for remorse and worry.
But they believe, like for example, there are many people out there doing harm to other people and they believe deeply in their cause.
Yes, they can, but, you know, I think that it's impossible for them to completely deny in their own hearts the harm that they cause others.
Oh, blind faith.
Yeah.
Does that mean they're going to have less remorse?
They're going to have less remorse in the immediate moment while the blind faith is strong, but, you know.
Blind faith it can fade too, it's like all things.
That's right.
And then once that fades, they will feel the remorse.
That's right, and I believe at a very, very deep level in their heart, even while through their faith they deny it, they know that the harm that they cause to others is not a good thing.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah?
What happens if, if someone becomes a soldier or a policeman or an owner of a restaurant, how do you know when you're doing it right or wrong? What defines,
Right livelihood.
Mm-hmm. What defines right livelihood?
Uh-huh.
Well, you know, there is a very simple rule that you can apply to anything that helps greatly in deciding that. If what you are doing is causing suffering or has the potential to cause suffering to either others or to yourself in the future in some way, it's probably not right. You know? And so that is the simplest thing that you can go by. If you look at what right speech includes, which is refraining from false speech, harsh speech, divisive speech, and gossip, these are all things that are either immediately harmful or potentially harmful to other people, right? And if you're not sure whether something is gossip or divisive speech or so, all you have to ask yourself is, what if someone else were saying this about me, how would I feel? And that will give you a pretty strong indication And likewise with right action, which is refraining from taking what's not freely given, and actually the first part of right action is just simply not causing harm to other beings. We can make up all kinds of scenarios, or we can find ourselves in a situation and rationalize that, well, this isn't really taking what's not freely given. But if you carefully examine the impact that it might have on someone else and put yourself in somebody else's position, then you can see if somebody else would see it differently than you do, then probably it's a wrong action. But it's not, these things, perfecting your virtue isn't taking a set of rules and following it to the letter. Perfecting virtue is working within your own heart, examining all of your actions as they're committed, or as the possibility for their commission comes to mind, and examining them in your own heart and making your own decision. This is the perfection of a virtue. And your interpretation of what is virtuous and what is not will change over time as your perception becomes more refined and as your mind becomes more refined. To start out with, if you just give up murdering people, that may be a big step for you. But there's a long way to go beyond that. Also, although in the basic teachings, the presentation of it usually stops at not committing the acts that are harmful to somebody else. The perfection of virtue actually can go much beyond that, because right speech can mean not only saying things that are false or harmful to others, but it can be using speech wisely. It can be using speech in such a way that it is helpful and beneficial to others. It can include refraining from speech when what you might say has the potential to create a problem. So there is this other dimension. The precept against not taking what is freely given can mean not only taking something that's somebody else's, but it could mean when you're sharing something, coming from a place of generosity. Do you take the last cookie on the plate, or do you leave it for somebody else?
That sounds really wonderful, but is that what the precept is that what the Buddha meant when he gave the precept? Is that
the precept is a guideline for you to develop your own virtue.
Okay, so it's kind of like just the beginning.
It's just the beginning, and it's open-ended.
Okay.
Not taking other people's property can also extend into protecting somebody else's property. You see that somebody else forgot and left something outside their door that somebody might steal, and so you take that and you put it in a safe place for them. There's all kinds of ways that you can go beyond just the most basic interpretation of it. All of which, and it comes back to the meditation aspect of it, all of which is going to create in you a mind that is susceptible to inner peace. Right? And that's, yeah.
You mentioned the samasat, when you never can reach the higher level if you don't have right speech and action and right people. So just by purely practicing meditation, actually we really cannot reach the certain level unless you, it seems like you engage together with
I'm not sure. By practicing meditation alone, that's not enough. If If you meditate 5 hours a day, and then in between meditation sessions you go out and lie about people and slander and steal things from the office, and it's not going to be enough by itself, because
not that bad, but
not that bad, I know, but and then I was exaggerating, but yeah, exactly. You to really be successful on the Eightfold Path, you meditate, but every other part of your life is important as well. You have to purify your virtue. So.
Well, on the other hand, when you practice on meditation, maybe that brings you more self-awareness or wisdom, so you will have better wisdom.
Exactly. Yes, exactly, because that is the problem, isn't it? So it's fun to say, okay, I'm going to keep the precepts. But then you go out there and you find yourself doing the same things over and over again that you've always done. Changing your behavior is much more than a matter of making a decision to take precepts and even repeating them every day. You have to have the mindful awareness to recognize when you're about to do something that is a violation of the precepts. The two work together. The meditation provides you with the mindful awareness that you need to change your behavior. And then as you perfect your virtue, then this gives you this prepares your mind to enter into profound states of concentration and insight. Absolutely. I'm glad you noticed that. Yeah. Sophia,
you're talking about right concentration. Is concentrate to samatha. I don't really understand the samatha, but the 10 stage you give us, the last stage is it could be samatha?
I'm sorry, the
Okay. You're talking about the right concentration.
Yeah.
Is to samatha.
Yes.
But I don't really understand samatha. And the 10 stage you give us about meditation, the last stage, is it could be samatha?
That's samatha. That's right. As a matter of fact, the 8th, 9th, and 10th stages are all samatha, but the 10th stage is the perfected or completed samatha.
Okay, one more question. About the ignorance, meaning or ignorance. We are in this situation, could I say, first of all, we are not really knowing the impermanence and emptiness.
That's right. Yes. It's the impermanence, the emptiness, and the dissatisfactoriness. These three are the three characteristics of all phenomena. They're the three characteristics of all of our experience. Is that everything is impermanent, everything is empty, including the self. So that's anatta, or selflessness. The self is empty as well. Okay. So the first is impermanence, and the second is the emptiness, both of self and of the objects that we cling to. And the third is dissatisfactoriness. And we've talked about dissatisfactoriness. We've talked about the dukkha, the characteristic of dukkha. Okay. But yes, it's the ignorance of these three things. And ultimately, these are the three things that we want to gain profound insight into. When we have a profound understanding of impermanence, and impermanence isn't just that things change. Impermanence is that there really are no things, there is only change. And that the appearance of things is something that our mind generates. Because everything is constantly changing. Do you know what I mean there? Everything is constantly changing. And it's our mind that leads us to look at things instead of look at objects as being somehow a stable and relatively enduring separate entity. but that separate entity is it's constantly changing. It's come together from other parts through causes and conditions, and it is also going to likewise dissolve and disappear eventually through causes and conditions, all of its parts continuing to interact with the rest of everything that is. So there is only impermanence. As a matter of fact, at another level, the only way that we know that there are things is through our senses. And if we examine our senses, sensation is constantly changing. Sensation constantly changes. So there is this continuous flux of sensation out of which our mind generates the idea of all of these objects and of the world as a whole. And so when we say things are empty, we mean they're empty of having a nature of being the way that they appear to us. Because that's just something our mind has projected to explain the sensations that we experience. And I can go into that in more detail, but this is the aspect of emptiness. And the self that we think we are is likewise, really, in the root, the self is just a creation of our mind as well. And so, the common, ordinary way of thinking of reality is that there exists a universe of objects that are self-existently real from their own side. And then here I am in the middle of this universe of objects, and I am a separate, self-existently real entity. Is that not how you're used to thinking of things? You are a separate self in the middle of a world of independently existing objects. And that's a mistaken way of thinking that gets us into all of this problem. Because then, when the self that we think we are experiences pleasure and pain, then we have craving for both the desire to have and the desire to avoid things in order to make ourselves happy. And so the third characteristic, the third part of the illusion is that we imagine things being in this way, and that if only we can manipulate this external world of objects in the right way, that we will then, that the self will become happy and free from suffering. And people, the world is full of people holding that view and proving over and over again that it doesn't work. Okay? So we're looking for the better way, the way of deeper understanding. Now, I think what this brings us to the insights that you need to, that I need to point the way to so that you can discover in your meditation. And we begin with correcting the view. I said wisdom was right view and right intention. And we'll talk about the right intention another time. But right now we're talking about right view. So I want you to start confirming through your meditation experience the way things really are. Now, I think that you may have already discovered this, but if not, confirm it for yourself. What you are conscious of is one of two kinds of things. We could call those things material things and mental things. Is this a sensible way to divide the world to you? There's the physical and material, and then there's that which is mental. But if we examine this a little more closely, how do we know of the existence of material things? And how do we know the nature of material things? Do we know material objects directly? Or we know them actually by means of our senses, right? And just to make this clear, imagine that you were born blind. And I say blind because, as we talked about earlier, sight is a sense that already has the tendency to project identity of objects very strongly. If you were blind and you had to learn everything about the world only through touch, you have only the sensations through touch, and in your mind you have to figure out how these different things that you feel are related to each other. You know the story about the blind man and the elephant? Right? Everybody knows that story. So if you were a blind person, the only way that you could have a clear idea of an elephant is you would have to feel every part of the elephant, and you would create an idea in your mind of what an elephant was based on those sensations. Well, that's what you do anyway. You're not blind, so you just add to that the image of the elephant that comes from your eyes. But actually what I'm pointing out to you is the two kinds of things that you know, the two kinds of things that you become conscious of are not material objects and mental objects, but they are sensations and mental objects. These are the only two things you have. Sensations from the five bodily senses, and mental objects. Now, mental objects, what do I mean by mental objects? Those are things that are known directly to the mind. A thought, an emotion, a feeling of pleasant and unpleasant, these are all examples of mental objects. Concepts, the idea of a car, or a bird, or a person, a cup, an apple, these are all mental objects in your mind, right? So we would like to think that we understand the world and material objects, but what I want you to confirm through your practice is indeed everything you know about the world is a story your mind has made up to explain sensations. Does everyone follow this? Because your entire existence, your entire life, has consisted of a series of conscious experiences where you have felt one kind of sensation or another. You have seen color with your eyes. You felt hot or cold, or hot or soft, hot or cold, or soft or hard, or other things. All of the different sensations you have with your body. Your entire knowledge of your body comes from sensation. Sounds, smells. Your mind has put these all together. But the world that you live in, each of us lives in a world that our mind has created to explain the sensations that we have experienced, to make sense of them. We created a model of a real world in our mind, and we think that's the real world. That's where it exists, is in your own mind. And so that's one of the things I want you to satisfy yourself, first of all, that this is true. I want you to have completely satisfied, and then I want you to continue to remind yourself for the rest of your life until you become enlightened that the world that you think exists out there really exists in here. And all you've had to go by is the sensations, the eyes, the ears, in making up that world.
If that's the case, then how do we distinguish whether say for example, sometimes we will have dreams.
Yeah.
Then in the dreams, images are very vivid that when we wake up, we still feel like that we haven't, but we know that was a dream.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I know that I'm not dreaming right now? That this is actually a dream and I'm actually supposed to wake up in a different state?
Very good point. A very good point, and it's something for you all to think about. How do you know? Because when you realize that your mind is not only has created this world, then immediately you realize that last night or the night before or many other nights, your mind has done that exact thing, but it's been a completely different world than this one, with completely different objects and different places and different people, right? And so this is very important, because first of all, it makes you aware of the fact that indeed, if you were doubting that your mind's capable of creating the whole world, all you have to do is think about the fact that it's done it many times before. When not only has your mind done it, it's done it when you're asleep. So your mind's capable of it. Right. But yes, and then you come down to the question, well, how do I know that this isn't a dream right now? And I'll tell you, many very wise people, philosophers of all sorts, have pondered this question. And the answer is, and you'll find the same answer yourself, there is absolutely no way to know with certainty that this is not a dream. There is not. And in a sense, the answer, the reason why that is that because it is a mind-created reality, it is a different kind of mind-created reality than the one we call dreams. And we have to recognize that. And it would be a mistake to say, oh, that means that this is all a dream. Because this is different than what we call dreams. But you can never know for sure whether this particular moment is a dream or not. Now, how can you tell? There are some differences. There's very important things. All those things that you call dreams lack a certain kind of consistency that the world that your mind has created based on sense experience lacks. In the world your mind has created based on sense experience, if you jump out a window, you're likely to die or break a leg or something like that. But in that kind of reality you experience in dreams, it doesn't have that consequence. In the world your mind has created to explain sensation, if you take a physical object and you put it over there, and then you do something else, and you go back to it a minute later, it will still be there, and it will be the same thing. It will feel the same way, and it will look the same way. Whereas in your dreams, things lack that consistency. How often in a dream do you dream you have something, and then it's gone, and you can't make it come back, or it changes into something else? So the one single thing that you do have to go by is the consistency that what we call waking reality has. It distinguishes it from those many other realities that are what we normally, conventionally call dreams. The way of stating this is to say that waking reality is constrained by the senses. Dream reality is not so constrained. Dream reality can violate certain kinds of rules of causality. In waking reality, no matter how you flap your wings, you won't fly. But in dreaming reality, sometimes you do. Any of you ever had dreams of flying? Mm-hmm. Maybe not flapping your arms, maybe jumping up and down. Very often people have dreams of flying, but this reality is constrained by your senses. How would you know you flew anyway? I mean, if you decide to raise your arm, How do you know you raised your arm? Well, you can see it go up, and if your eyes are closed, you can feel it. And in your dream, you can do things that would otherwise be impossible and see them happen and feel them happen. But in this reality, it's constrained by the senses, and and there's rules of causality that are going to be followed. So this is really the only way that you can distinguish between the two. And you can never tell that this is not a dream. But you can tell that something belongs to what we conventionally call dream reality if it lacks that consistency. If you find that you can fly, then you immediately suspect it's a dream. If you're reading a book and you turn the page and you see a person's face looking back at you, pretty good chance it's probably a dream. Right? If you jump out of a building and you're still all right afterwards, it's probably a dream. So, yeah.
Do you agree that we are conditioned by our perception?
By our
Perception. Yes, and so because we are heavily conditioned by that, so the things we cannot do right now, that some like enlightened beings or good meditators, they develop some superpowers, like they read some arahat, they can read somebody's mind, or from the book I read that some enlightened beings, they can just walk through the walls, this sort of thing. So how do you explain that?
An enlightened being knows how the mind creates this reality. And with that knowledge, it becomes possible to do some things that those of us who don't know how it happens and who don't even realize that the mind's creating it can't possibly do. The first step is to discover that your mind is creating the reality that you live in. Now, before I read this subject behind, I just reinforce, we're not saying that it is only a dream, and we're not saying that your mind has created the entire universe. That would be a little bit foolish of us to believe that. So your mind did not create the entire world. And this is not a dream, and you can't treat everybody in it as if, how do you want it? Because you just made them up anyway. Okay? But and we are different conscious beings. Now, ultimately, we're not. But at least at this level of conventional reality, we're different conscious beings. And we do share much of the reality that each of us has made up in our own mind, does share much in common with the reality that other people have made up in their mind. And we can call that conventional reality. So we're not negating all of that entirely. Okay? But it is a very important sense. And as you progress in insight, your understanding will deepen. But you can see with a little bit of reflection that the reality that you live in is created in your mind. And that is why two people in exactly the same situation, one can be happy and one can be sad. Because they're not really, as a third person, we would say, oh, they're both in the same situation, but they're not. Each of them is living in a different world.
Even the same person, experiencing the same thing, one can be happy, one can be sad.
That's absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. The world that we create and the self that we are is created by our mind, and it's constantly changing. It is. It's not even the same day to day. It's not even the same moment to moment. So it's it's impermanent, as well as empty. This goes to a much more profound level of understanding. And it's actually when you recognize the impermanence, the emptiness, and the unsatisfactoriness of things as we normally perceive them, as the way your mind usually makes things happen, that when you see that clearly, your mind will stop doing that. And you'll have the experience of understanding how things really are. And you will become, through that knowledge, you'll become liberated from the causes of suffering. The first thing that happens is that you are no longer entrapped by the belief in and attachment to your personal self. And that right away removes a lot of suffering. How much of your personal suffering is related to your sense of self, your ego, of I am this, I. Me, mine, this is mine, if I lose it, I'm unhappy, I, me, and mine. Right away, a lot of your suffering and unhappiness will be eased greatly just when you can see through the illusion of I, me, and mine. Yeah.
So, question about the I and awareness. So, through meditation, we should try to remove the illusion of the I, the self. But we also need to develop the awareness. So, what's the component of the awareness? Where does it come from?
You asked the question, if there is no self, where does awareness come from?
Yes, what's the content of awareness?
Well,
in your mind.
Let's just leave it at the moment that the awareness is not because there is a self that is behind all of this. Okay, this is what you have. This is one of the main obstacles to this. Is we keep having all these different kinds of experiences where there's I see, I hear, I feel, I think. And we have this concept of a self that's embedded in all of our experience. That is the hardest thing to overcome. And I wasn't, you see, the easiest thing for you to understand is impermanence. And likewise, relatively easy to understand is the emptiness of the world, of the external world, in the sense that I've been talking about tonight. It's easy to understand impermanence, and it's easy to understand that the world that you know is a projection of your own mind. The world that you live in is a projection of your own mind. And so start with these. These are the easiest things to get a grasp on. As you grasp them more and more clearly, and as you come to be able to distinguish very clearly that things appear to have some enduring, independent existence, but that is only an appearance in my mind. And as that becomes clearer, then you begin to have more and more deeper understanding of this truth of dukkha, of suffering. Because then the more that you can see that everything is impermanent and everything is empty of any kind of nature of actually being the way we perceive it from its own side, that its appearance comes from our mind, then comes the realization that, well, being fooled by this appearance will only cause me suffering. And grasping to that which is not what it appears to be will only cause me suffering. And grasping to that which is bound to pass away because it's the result of causes and conditions and is impermanent, is bound to cause me suffering. So these are the insights that you want to develop to start with. You will not really overcome the belief in your personal self until you have reached the first stage of enlightenment. And you will be an Aryan being, a noble being, an enlightened being, not fully enlightened, but on the first stage. At the point that you have an experience that penetrates, that gives you the penetrating understanding that indeed the self that you cling to is just a creation of your mind. Now do definitely come as close to that understanding as you can. See how your mind artificially constructs this idea of who you are and how it believes in those things, and keep seeing more and more clearly the illusory nature of that. But don't expect to actually penetrate into the true understanding of anatta, of the fact that there is no enduring self, or the emptiness of self, until you've reached the first stage of enlightenment. And then in a moment it will become perfectly clear, and that will change your life thereafter.
Well, my first question is, what is awareness in a meditation? What is that?
What is awareness? Just leave it at awareness is something that you're trying to cultivate because you need to use it to gain this understanding. Okay?
Can I share a story? I have a friend.
Well, first of all, does that satisfy you? Yeah. Yeah. I know you want a philosophical answer. What is?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's kind of puzzling, If there's no I, and we should, try to destroy the I. How can we use the awareness? So I cannot make it come back to it. But I know awareness can help you come to your mind.
Yeah. Well, these are things that we can talk about more as we go along. But we're running out of time tonight, and I do want to build up a clearer, build up a good strong basis before we get into. I mean, this is one of the most difficult questions. What is the nature of consciousness and conscious awareness, and how does this relate to I? So this is a very important question, but it's a more challenging one, and we don't have the time really to go into it right now. Yes? Someone else?
Just a quick question. I'm just curious as to the answer to Culadasa earlier question. Is that a yes or no?
about enlightened beings with superpower. Whether we read in the book, those arahats can read your mind. They can walk through the wall, and they have this amazing psychic power. I mean, this is a part of our practice, isn't it? We need to understand it, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the best way to find the answer to that question is to look at Allah.
I know.
So, if a book tells you they do, if I tell you they do, or if I tell you that they don't, is that going to make any difference? If I say, well, yes, arhats can walk through walls, then the next teacher you go to, you say, well, the book says they can, and Culadasa says they can't, but I want to know what you think. So find out for yourself.
Yeah, because in the sutra, obviously Buddha himself has this power.
Yeah, that's right.
So you agree?
I agree.
So can you read my mind?
I'm out of time. I can't answer that. But what I think that we should have a sit before bed. So if you'd like to take just 5 minutes to have